Welcome to Monday Night in Prophecy, originally held on June 7th of this year, but because of technical difficulties, the YouTube presentation is delayed just a little bit. We apologize for that, but we're glad you tuned in. This is going to be kind of a special time this time because so much happened in May that it just is going to take a little longer today to go through all of that. So hang in there and stay with us. Our presentation is built on the Word of God. That's our basis. That's where the prophecies come from that we see today being fulfilled one by one. In the New Testament, we have many end-time prophecies, and even in the Old Testament, they are being fulfilled even as we speak. And so the first part that I want to cover is the Bible teaching on eschatology. What I'd like to do today, just a little different, is 10 takeaways from the last conflict between Israel and Hamas, the one that just happened, the 11-day war that we witnessed. What can we take away from it? So let's go right to it. Number one, Israel's military is among the world's best. I think we saw that. The star of the latest conflict was Israel's Iron Dome. While Hamas placed their military fortunes in unsophisticated rockets fired indiscriminately towards Israel population centers, Israeli missile defense demonstrated just how deep the gap is between fighting units. So on one side, you have bombs going off, rockets going off, without any aim, just hitting anywhere, and not even all of them, only 80%, 20% fell within Gaza. Can you imagine that? And whereas on the Israeli side, you have the Iron Dome going up, seeking out the enemy rockets and wiping them out. I love this picture of the rockets coming from Gaza. They always came in a great amount to try to overwhelm the Iron Dome, but that didn't happen. And so you see on the left side all those Iron Dome rockets ready to attack those rockets coming up out of Gaza. Number two, Hamas suffered a military humiliation. 4,400 rockets and 62 miles of tunnel networks that took years of development and cost hundreds of millions, if not billions, to construct, killed a grand total of 12 people in Israel before being utterly decimated. Furthermore, some 650 of the rockets fired at Israel landed inside the Gaza Strip and killed women and children. And so that's where we find most of the dead people from their own rockets. And you know, you look at those pictures and the destruction that happened in Gaza, and they're celebrating. You're thinking, is this really a time to celebrate? With this kind of incredible damage? But that's what they did, claiming that they won the war. Well, let's go on to number three. Gaza is not the most dangerous Palestinian battlefront. While Israel did all it could to focus attention on Hamas inside Gaza, the southwestern Palestinian enclave is only one front in a larger battle against the Jewish state. Gaza is relatively easy to bombard from the air, while Gazans beyond a border fence cannot commit individual acts of terror inside Israel. But outside Gaza, Palestinians living within Israel, some 1 million and some, you never know what they're up to. This is at the Al-Aqsa temple just outside, or the Aqsa mosque, I should say, just outside the steps that lead into it. And they're not cleaning up the mess. They're collecting rocks and then throw them over the wall, down where the western wall is, where the people pray, where they celebrate, and they try to injure as many as possible. That's what is happening right there in Jerusalem. Number four, narrative warfare. It all started when he hit me back. Regardless of measures Israel may have attempted to reduce and avoid hostilities, Hamas, with the aid from Western media, had already constructed its narrative. Hamas had no choice but to fire rockets from Gaza once Israeli police had stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Well, why did they storm the Al-Aqsa Mosque? Because that's where the rockets were. Look at the picture on the left. That's inside the mosque. And look at what they're doing. They're collecting stones right there on the carpet to throw down, because that's what you see on the right. The young people throwing stones, some with slingshots, to add more speed to hit Israelis down below. Number 5, narrative warfare, the battle for hearts and minds. The reason the Palestinians claim victory has nothing to do with the exceedingly minor physical damage inflicted on Israel. Rather, it is because Palestinians perceive that they scored points, the greater battle fought in the minds and hearts of Palestinians and the international community. And sure enough, it is the international community that was turning to the side of the poor Palestinians, getting attacked by Israel, even though the Palestinians in Gaza started the war. And yet, they are the underdog, right? And so the world, many countries are on the side of the Palestinians. It talks about Israeli terror on those signs. End the siege. What siege on Gaza? There are no Israelis in Gaza. Gaza is like its own little country. Oh yes, it depends on food from Israel and water from Israel and gasoline from Israel and concrete from Israel. Some also from Egypt. But no Israeli is inside Gaza. And so the siege is not by Israel, it's by Hamas, which is trying to destroy at any cost. Number 6, Palestinian lives matter. Israelis watched from afar with amazement as violent riots enveloped American cities this past year under the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Race became the most important issue. Members of the anti-Israel community in the United States had long ago linked up with progressive causes, an irony considering how far from progressive Palestinian society is. They are apart as far as you can imagine, and yet, because they are a race, like the black race, there is support there. They are also suppressed by the Israelis, so to speak, and so they were supported by them. Palestinian lives matter. Israeli lives matter. Well, yes, they do. Black lives matter. Yes, they do. All lives matter. Why is that so difficult to get through our skull, that all lives matter, no matter where they are, no matter what color they are or what profession they have? All lives matter. Number 7, does the Democratic Party still support Israel? While the old guard of the Democratic Party has long supported Israel, the younger, more progressive group does not hold Israel in the same regard. They know Israel only through the prism of the failed Oslo Accords. This young guard has taken over the momentum of the party to the fear of the old guard losing their seats. And so there's a change, ever so slow, where the new, younger Democrats would support the Palestinians over Israel. And so there you have this fight because Republicans, certainly all of them support Israel. Number 8, the money trail towards peace or violence. The Trump administration was charting a new course toward peace in the Middle East. The principles were simple: punish bad actors with sanctions, financially incentivize peace, and solve the Middle East conflict from the outside in. Now that the flow of funds has reversed and terrorism is back on the agenda. We're talking about the Abraham Accord that Trump initiated. On September 15, 2020, leaders from the United States, Israel, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates signed an historic peace accord that will begin the normalization of relations between Israel and the surrounding Arab nations. The Abraham Accords represent an unprecedented move toward establishing peace in the Middle East. The false peace treaty between Israel and many nations, according to Daniel 9:27, says this: He, referring to Antichrist, will confirm a covenant with many, referring to nations, for 1/7, referring to 7 years. And so when Antichrist comes, he will be the one that will say, I'm bringing peace between the Arabs and between Israel. And so he will pick up with the Abraham Accords and include as many as possible. The Bible says many nations. But it's a false peace, because 3.5 years later, Antichrist will break this peace treaty and he will turn against Israel. That's what the Bible tells us. Number 9, Iran. Iran has played a key role in the current conflict. In the past several years, months and weeks, Israel has been covertly striking Iranians' nuclear infrastructure, attacking commercial vessels, and striking Iranian-made weapons transferred into Syria. Iran has tried repeatedly to strike back, recently targeting Israeli commercial sea-bound vessels. Iran is supporting and supplying Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, the Syrian regime, and even fractions in Iraq. They have one goal, and that is to destroy Israel, to drive them in the ocean, to wipe them out, to kill them. They need to be gone, according to Iran. Number 10, more threats from Hamas. What has happened is but a drill for what will come if Israel violates the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Sinwar said in an address to the people on Wednesday, the occupation, Israel, must know Al-Aqsa has men who will defend it. He claimed there are 10,000 suicide bombers in Israel willing to respond to any Israeli violation. You see, that's what I was talking about before. The Palestinians living within Israel, having Israeli citizenships as Arabs, as Muslims. But how many of them, if they have the opportunity, will turn against Israelis and the country itself? So that's the leader, Yahya Sinwar, the new leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. A lot of power there, a lot of bad decisions. And that brings us to part 2 of our evening, the end time signs. The Bible tells us to know the signs of the end time. We're living in times where those end time signs are abundant. They're flowing like a river, and it's hard for me to pack all of the stuff that's happening into our presentation, but I try the best. And so we go to Sunday, the 2nd of May, the ring of fire around Israel. There are 22 Islamic nations. They're 640 times in size of Israel. And they're 60 times in population. Overwhelming. And yet, we see in 1948, we see in 1967, and in further other wars that happened, like with Egypt. Again and again and again, we see that Israel wins supernaturally with an enemy that is many, many times stronger, many, many times more people, and yet Israel comes out on top. Watch this little video clip.
Another day, another rocket attack against U.S. personnel and American citizens in Iraq. We told you about the attack on Sunday. I believe that was May 2nd. On Baghdad International Airport, 2 rockets launched at a base there where U.S. troops are stationed. Thankfully, no one was hurt in that attack. But yet another barrage. Last night, Monday, May 3rd, 6 rockets launched against Balad Air Base north of Baghdad. It's a site where U.S. contractors are based. Now, 3 of the rockets actually fell inside Balad. The other 3 did not, thankfully, but a contractor was apparently wounded, a contractor who works with American personnel in Iraq. And of course, the Iranian regime is behind this constant stream of rocket attacks, as we have told you many times here on the newscast, in particular working through proxy. Now, the proxy they use in Iraq is those Iraqi Shia militias, but we've told you many times about the ring of fire that Iran has surrounding Israel right now, Hezbollah, Hamas, those Shia militias, of course, the Houthis in Yemen.
Now we're switching to Canada, Monday the 3rd of May, 2021. Canadian pastor Arthur Pawlowski and brother David Pawlowski arrested after the church service in Calgary, Alberta. Listen to this video.
What's your name, officer?
Do it the Nazi style. Do it the Nazi style. You're good Gestapo, do it the Nazi style. Do it the Nazi style. Do it the Nazi style! Do it, they'll taser me, kill me! Do it the Nazi style.
Shame on you guys.
Well, we're back in Jerusalem, Tuesday the 4th of May, 2021. Prayer rally at site of Moloch worship to prevent sacrificing children to COVID vaccine. You remember the Old Testament story of Israelites and others to worship Moloch and offer up their firstborn child, having their child killed to this false god. Well, they're going to the place where that happened, and they're saying, we don't want to sacrifice our children now to the COVID vaccine. In other words, that too could have long-term effects that we don't know. The event location is overlooking the Hinnom Valley, Gehinnom, which is where Canaanites and wayward Israelites used to sacrifice children to Moloch. The common denominator will stage a unity prayer rally, bringing together people of all faiths. Of course, we know that that's a problem. People of all faiths. In other words, there will be Muslims, there will be Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and everyone prays to their God. And hopefully God will hear. Well, God doesn't, because those other gods are an abomination to God. Let's go on to Wednesday the 5th of May. Iranians produce a song in honor of General Qasem Soleimani bombing the U.S. Congress and the liberation of Jerusalem. And you'll see that on the video, how the Congress blows up and how Jerusalem is liberated. So let's go ahead and watch that video.
دلم را بردی سلیمانی به شهر چشمان بارانی رها کردی عاشقانت را میان دریای طوفانی نحن المنتقمون نحن المتحدون نحن المنتقمون نحن المتحدون نحن المنتقمون نحن علی امروز سپاه علوی میخواهد رهبری ملت بیدار و قوی میخواهد با سپاه علوی کاخ ستم شد ویران میرسد مژده آزادی قدس از ایران جاده و از مهیاس بیا تا برویم حاج قاسم دلش اینجاست بیا تا برویم حاج قاسم دلش اینجاست بیا تا برویم.
Let's go on to Thursday, the 6th of May. The situation on the oceans of the Middle East, you might have never thought about it, but the Red Sea has two arms. One goes into the Suez Canal to the left, and one thin canal goes to the right, and that's the Gulf of Aqaba. And it ends right at the point where Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia all come together with Israel. And so it's at that point that I like to show you a short video.
Well, Elliot, we are here on the Red Sea.
Yes, we are.
At really what I would say one of the most critical crossroads of the Middle East. Set the scene for us right now about where we are and why it's so important.
Well, actually, it's not just a crossroads of the Middle East. We're in a crossroads of the world. We're at the northern end of the Gulf of Eilat, the Gulf of Aqaba by the Jordanian city that's up here, the port. If we continue down beyond that V that's formed by the two gulfs, we're in the Red Sea, which empties out through Bab el-Mandeb, Yemen, Somalia, and out into the Indian Ocean, and from there to the Pacific.
All the hot spots.
All the hot spots, that's right. So essentially from here, whether it's via the Suez Canal in recent decades, centuries, or even earlier, from here up across to the ports on the Mediterranean, today Ashdod and Haifa, in earlier times Ashkelon, from there out to the Atlantic. So we're not only in a crossroads of the continents, we're also in a crossroads of the oceans.
And pretty amazing. Israel is right here, obviously, Elliot, the great resort town of Eilat. There's tourists, beautiful spot for vacation. But you have Eilat, you have Israel, but then right here, where we're looking, this is Egypt.
Yes.
This is Jordan,
Correct.
and over the horizon there is Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Wow.
Right in the middle.
So the proximity, thankfully Israel obviously has peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt.
Yes.
Relations
And
seem to be warming with Saudi Arabia.
Funny how the Iranians have made the Saudis realize that the Zionists aren't their enemy.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute. Talk about some of the challenges, say, Israel faces in patrolling and monitoring the Red Sea.
Okay, well, first of all, since we have peace with our neighbors here, we have agreements with Jordan and Egypt, and again, Saudi Arabia busy with other problems, we don't have national threats on this body of water. In other words, there are no navies that threaten. I think it pays to remember that one of the issues that started the Six-Day War was Egyptian President Nasser's closing of the Straits of Tiran, which is the exit from the Gulf into the Red Sea. In other words, he blockaded Eilat, not with a naval blockade, but with a gun blockade from the shore.
Right.
But we don't have that problem anymore. We do have a terrorist problem, and as you can see just looking around here, we're in the desert in every which way.
This is rugged terrain.
Which makes it happy hunting ground for terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
And we have Al-Qaeda here, we've had them for a long time, and all sorts of other jihadi. Today we say Al-Qaeda is kind of a catch-all phrase for all sorts of spin-offs and breakaways and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we've got all of that operating in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, and now primarily
and in Egypt here in Sinai. Talk about what Iran would like to do in the Red Sea.
In the Red Sea, Iran would like to choke it. And we've already seen the initial, call it the introduction to that story with the Houthi rebels in Yemen. A lot of people, I think, oh, there's a rebellion going on in Yemen. Who cares? Why should that make a difference to me? And a glance at the map will tell you why, because the tip of Yemen is the shore of the entrance to the Red Sea, the southern entrance. And whoever controls those straits, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, essentially controls the Suez Canal without having to be there. Because if you can't get in or out of the Red Sea, the Suez Canal becomes useless as a dead end.
So Iran's goal, and as America ramps up sanctions and pressure, rightfully so, Iran is threatening to choke off these vital waterways.
Well, so Iran has two choke points, two critical choke points. One, Bab el-Mandeb, which is for global maritime shipping. And the Straits of Hormuz, of course, where just recently there were the unidentified anonymous attacks on the tankers, on the Saudi tankers, which of course we all know was done by Iran, but they'll deny it.
Of course.
And the West, always confusing legal with political issues, says, well, if we don't have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, it doesn't work that way in the strategic world. Right. But they'll deny they're investigating it.
They're on it.
But they're showing that they can choke those 2 points. Oil shipment out of the Gulf and general maritime shipping through the canal.
Yeah, Iran has larger aspirations, Elliot, as you and I have talked about many times here on the show. They'd like to get out the Atlantic.
Yes, and that's why they have
flex global muscle.
That's why they have naval bases on the Mediterranean and Syria. Yeah. It's one of the reasons, not the only one, that they're ramping up their presence in Syria so they can have access to those bases. Their interest is global, and once again, they have their anchor on the Indian Ocean. Yeah. They want it now on the Mediterranean.
Right. Which is why, and look, the Red Sea is in the neighborhood, obviously, vital waterway, which is why it's so vital for Israel, Egypt. Everyone has an interest. Jordan, Saudi Arabia,
well,
they all have an interest in the world in keeping this tame and safe here in the Red Sea.
Now let's turn our attention to China in the Far East. Friday the 7th of May, China's social credit system invades North America. China expert Gordon G. Jank reported that there now are 60 surveillance cameras watching 30 tables at the Hidalgo Hot Pot restaurant in Vancouver, Canada. The images captured are fed directly to China. Beijing will at some point be able to assign a social credit score to just about everyone on the planet. As you know, in China, they are having those social credits for things that you do right, like going to the meetings of the communists and obeying all their laws. Or they take away some of those credits if you don't exactly obey in every area. Well, their dream is one day the whole world will be under that system, the social credit system of China. And maybe that is true, but I don't believe before the rapture. So keep an eye on how that develops even within China. That brings us back to the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem. Saturday the 8th of May. 80 Palestinians injured in riots at Israel's Damascus Gate. At least 80 Palestinians were hurt in riots at Damascus Gate outside Israel's Old City on Saturday, and 14 were hospitalized after protesters hurled bottles and rocks at security forces, and the police responded with stun grenades and water cannons. On Saturday night, around 90,000 Palestinians attended prayer at the Temple Mount, marking the Ramadan holiday's holiest night. According to the Times of Israel, worshippers at the compound chanted in support of the Hamas terror group's military wing. So they're all up there on the Temple Mount, those 3 acres or so, chanting, yelling, angry at the Israelites, and they go home, most of them through the Damascus Gate. And I know that because I happened once to be there. I made the mistake of being there when Ramadan was going on, and you should have heard the people yell at us and scream at us because they're all upset and hyped up through the Ramadan. And so that's exactly what happened here. Let's continue on. Sunday the 9th of May. Israel launches a largest ever multi-front war exercise. They are expecting that war will break out from different directions. And they're right, because biblically they will attack from different directions, most of them though coming from the north, says Scripture. The Israel Defense Force launched a month-long war exercise on Sunday, the largest in its history, simulating a multi-front conflict. Ezekiel 38 talks about an end-time battle between Israel and Russia, Iran, Turkey, and other enemies. Little did they know at that point that this month-long exercise will be cut short very quickly because there was a war on the horizon. Monday the 9th of May. Turkey calls Israel terrorist state, seeking to save Jerusalem. And that's Erdogan, the president, who is after Israel already since years. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called Israel a cruel terrorist state, as Turkish media called to free Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, just like he reconsecrated the historic church of Hagia Sophia as a mosque last year. Writing in Turkish, Erdogan said he invites the whole world, especially the Islamic countries, to take effective action against Israel, attacking on Al-Aqsa Mosque, Jerusalem, and Palestinian homes. He likes to do that, and he's planning to do that for a long time, and one day he will. Again, Ezekiel 38:39, Turkey is mentioned, and they will be involved in that last time war. Tuesday, 11th of May, Israeli government surrenders Temple Mount to Jordan on anniversary of Six-Day War. What's going on? Well, on the Six-Day War, Israel always celebrates a very special day. They call it the Jerusalem Day. They go to the Western Wall, and they dance and they yell, and they have a wonderful time remembering that they came out as victors. But no one this time is allowed to walk up on the Temple Mount. No Jews are allowed to walk on the Temple Mount. No Gentiles either. Why? Because it's still Ramadan. And the Muslims up on the Temple Mount are wild, and they're angry, and they're screaming, and they light fires. And so, again, they throw stones down on the Israelites. And so the Israeli police had to go up there to have them stop throwing the stones on the Israelites below. This week, the Israelite government ascended to the demand of the Jordanian government to close the Temple Mount to Jewish visitors, essentially surrounding Jerusalem's holiest site on the anniversary of the victory that returned to the Jews to the Temple Mount. Jordan, the Temple Mount only for Muslims. On Monday, the Jordanian foreign minister sent an official protest memorandum to Israel, demanding that it stops what it defined as the provocation in the Al-Aqsa Mosque by permitting extremists to enter the mosque under Israeli security for the last 10 days of Ramadan. You see, they were allowed to go there. They didn't go in the mosque. The police went in because that's where the stones were. They needed to stop it. And so that was really their reason to start this offense and start this war. Sunday, the 16th of May. Jerusalem Day is celebrated in Israel since 1967. Let's go and watch that.
It's Jerusalem Day, Yom Yerushalayim, the day in which Israel celebrates the incredible moment in June 1967 when Israeli paratroopers liberated the old city of Jerusalem and reclaimed the Temple Mount and the Western Wall. For Israelis, returning to its ancient capital, Jerusalem, is cause for the greatest celebration. But there are many who refuse to accept Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Earlier this year, Ahmed Abudu, consultant editor at The Independent, who specializes in Middle East affairs, wrote that Tel Aviv is Israel's capital. When media outlets do this, they play right into the hands of the Palestinian leadership, which seeks to disconnect the Jewish people from having any historical connection to Jerusalem and to the Temple Mount. This began with a declaration by Yasser Arafat in October 1996, in which he said, "That is not the Western Wall, but rather it's a Muslim shrine." For more than 2 decades, Palestinian leaders continuously repeated this message. And then in May 2017, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, declared Israel as an occupying force here in Jerusalem. The declaration was supported by many countries around the world, including Russia, China, and Sweden. Aside from the fact that Jerusalem is mentioned in the Jewish Bible close to 700 times, the problem with the Palestinian narrative is that it has been proven to be outright false. Archaeological digs around the Temple Mount and the Western Wall right here have uncovered hundreds of coins, seals, and weights that make it clear that the Jewish people lived here in Jerusalem and worshipped up there in the Temple Mount over 2,000 years ago. A few examples. A coin with the word shekel, the currency used by Jews, referenced in the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Samuel. The second side features 3 pomegranates with the Hebrew words, Holy Jerusalem. A weight with the word Becca, which appears in Exodus 38, a weight used to measure the half-shekel donation made annually to the temple. A coin minted shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, which says, for the redemption of Zion. These are just 3 examples amongst hundreds that provide clear proof that the Hebrew-speaking Jewish people lived here in Jerusalem and functioned on the Temple Mount over 2,000 years ago.
So on Jerusalem Day, what happened was a tree up near the Al-Aqsa Mosque was set on fire by fireworks from the Palestinians. And there was so much sap in that tree, apparently, that this thing just went up in this huge flame. You know, Jerusalem will play a great role in the tribulation period. Because the Antichrist, for one, will set himself up as God in the third temple. That's on the Temple Mount. Also, the Jews will flee into the city as the enemy surrounds Jerusalem, which is a mistake because Antichrist will start killing Jews by the hundreds and thousands. Jesus will come into the city through the Golden Gate. Again, in Jerusalem, the Golden Gate. It's closed off right now. When Jesus comes, it'll explode and Jesus will come through. And the Jews will mourn over their sins and take Jesus into the heart in Jerusalem. All of that is yet to happen in the city of Jerusalem. You see the third temple, but it will be defiled and eventually destroyed. Defiled by Antichrist, destroyed by Jesus. And then Jesus will put up the fourth temple, the one that he will reign and rule for 1,000 years. Let's go on. Tuesday, the 11th of May. 700 rockets fired from Gaza since the weekend. Israel kills many leaders of Hamas. At that point, at the beginning of the war, we thought 700, that never happened, so many. Little did we know that it was going to end up with 4,400 rockets shot from that place. Let's go ahead and watch this video. Tuesday, the 11th, May 2021. While the Jews are celebrating the Israel Day, a large fire in front of the Al-Aqsa Mosque is burning. It is a tree that started to burn because of fireworks that the Palestinians threw at it. At the same time, the Israelis are dancing and singing because they are celebrating the Jerusalem Day. Watch this. Wednesday the 12th of May, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Wednesday told Russian President Vladimir Putin the international community should give Israel a strong and deterrent lesson as punishment for responding so strongly to deadly Palestinian terror rocket attacks. The two are meeting on quite a frequent basis. In fact, three are meeting. They include the Ayatollah from Iran. Those are the exact three countries that will lead the Ezekiel War. I believe we are in a preparation time period where they are getting ready for that attack. Turkey is ready today. Iran is ready today. Russia will follow at the right time. Thursday, the 13th of May. Israeli flags burned and synagogues attacked. Where? In Germany. German police have arrested several people of Arabic appearance following attacks on synagogues in North Rhine-Westphalia, including incitements where suspects burned Israeli flags in front of the synagogues. 1.5 million Syrians were allowed into Germany in 2015. And there we see the result of that move. Friday the 14th. Critical race theory is Marxist. Its real target is Christianity and the Bible. The far left wants it in our schools. The war on Christians is in full gear. In a nutshell, it claims that people who are white and from European backgrounds have succeeded because of their color, and they have oppressed people of color. Thus, people of color have been wronged, and if they fight back in any way, they are morally right. Really? They're morally right? Destroying stores? I don't think so. Saturday the 15th of May. The IDF, that's the Israeli Defense Force, reportedly led Hamas to believe that a ground offensive was about to begin, leading it to activate its elite Nupka unit, sending them into the tunnels to prepare to take on Israeli ground forces. With the trap set, the IDF struck. Some 160 Israeli Air Force aircraft dropped 450 bombs. More than 80 tons of explosives on the network of Gaza's underground defensive tunnels. The report said hitting many Hamas armed operatives. So many of their leaders died in those tunnels. Sunday the 16th of May, the war between Israel and Gaza continues. Watch what happens in this short video. Now I'd like you to listen to another video. Israel reinforces Gaza border zone. Listen.
What is happening in Gaza? Who's to blame? And what lies ahead? Well, before I tell you that, I can also confirm we've had some very, very poisonous demonstrations here in London today, including Israeli flags being burnt by so-called Palestinian supporters. But the reality of the situation in Israel and in Gaza is that a few days ago, the Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the terrorist forces that control Gaza, launched an intense bombardment of rockets at Israeli civilian population. And they've so far, since the last 3 or 4 days, they've fired over 2,000 rockets at the Israeli civilians. Most of them, I'm happy to say, have been taken down by the Israelis' Iron Dome missile defense system. Some have got through, and unfortunately, some Israelis have been killed.
Now we're going to switch once again. Sunday the 16th to 16th of Tuesday the 18th, I'm sorry, from Sunday the 16th to Tuesday the 18th of May is a very special time period for Israelis. It's the Feast of Shavuot, what we call Pentecost. What's the New Testament significance of that? Watch this Jewish explanation of Shavuot.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Holidays in 60 Seconds. Today's holiday is Shavuot. Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, commemorates the anniversary of the day God gave the Torah to the entire nation of Israel assembled on Mount Sinai. You have now completed counting the Omer, 50 days since the Passover. This holiday is also known as Pentecost, which means 50th day. Not only did God give the law, but it is also harvest time for wheat. Shavuot is also the day an individual can bring bikurim, or the first fruit offerings, to the temple. They include wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. Modern tradition includes reading poetry, consuming dairy products, reading the Book of Ruth, decorating the home with plants, and an all-night Torah study. Good times! Shavuot is a great time to celebrate God's provision and all the ways He has sustained the Jewish people throughout history. How are you celebrating God's provision? And that is Shavuot in 60 seconds.
Monday the 17th of May. The hatred towards the Jews increases. Listen what it says. British anti-Israel haters drive through London calling for rape of Jewish women. 4 men arrested for racist hate crime released on bail. Oh great, just release them again, let them continue, right? Well, listen to this guy, Tuesday the 18th, a CNN writer. The world today needs a Hitler, he states. A CNN writer has been writing in praise of Nazi leader Adolf Hitler. When the tweets came to light, he was let go by the news organization. My question is, why was he hired in the first place, right? Let's go ahead and watch another hate.
وأيدينا على السلاح أيدينا على الصواريخ أيدينا على تفجير الباصات أيدينا على العمليات الاستشهادية.
خلص يا 7 مليون فلسطيني برا بكفيكوا تسخين. في عندكم يهود في كل مكان، يجب أن نهجم على كل يهودي متواجد في الكرة الأرضية ذبحا وقتلا بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى.
من البحر إلى النهر ولن نعترف بإسرائيل.
اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم، اللهم عليك بالأمريكان ومن والاهم، اللهم احصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
وبدنا إياكم يا أهل القدس بالسكاكين امعطوا رقاب اليهود كلها تقف على العرق من هان. أما نحن هنا في غزة فلن يلقوا منا إلا البارود والنار، لن يجدوا منا إلا الشهادة، لن يجدوا منا إلا الموت والقتل.
Muslims behead and remove tongue of pastor who debated Muslims and converted them to Christianity. Pastor Thomas Shikoma, a resident of Komolo village, Palisa town, was killed after he was invited to an open-air debate in Palisa, where he had led 14 people, including 6 Muslims, to faith in Christ. So he leads them to Christ after he was asked to come and debate. But we have some Muslims that are now converted. Oh, that's against the law. So off the head goes. That's what's happening in Uganda, and this is not an exception. Friday the 21st of, that should say, May. After 4,400 rockets from Hamas in Gaza were fired towards Israel, a ceasefire came into effect. Because of pinpoint precision, the Israelis were able to destroy hundreds of Hamas offices, storehouses, and kill dozens of its leaders. Jonathan Schanzer, Senior Vice President of Research at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies. The assistance America has supplied Israel has allowed it to strike surgically at Hamas targets, which has allowed it to achieve a low civilian casualty rate. It is these munitions that have helped Israel keep this fight to a surgical nature, he said. As for a progressive group of legislators, Schanzer said they are small, but they are loud. And so it was actually the Americans that supplied those precision rockets to the Israelis so that they could only take out the enemy, not the women, not the children. That was done by the Palestinians themselves. Saturday, the 22nd of May, protests and riots around the world against Israel. I'd like you to listen to some of those rebellious remarks.
Please, just figure something out. I'm not a politician, I don't understand, but people are dying, innocent people are dying, and it's people that are close to me, so.
A sign reads, Palestinian children pay the price for guilty German conscience. Another sign says, Free Palestine. Palestinian says, Free Palestine, people are dying innocently. Well, yes, they are, because the Palestinians under Hamas leadership is killing their own women and children, and they're dying innocently. Not so much from the precision rockets of Israel. Here's another one. Jews for free Palestine. Jews! You see, there are Jews living around the world and in America who take the side of Palestine. They want to divide the country, make 2 nations out of it, and the Palestinians, if that would be the case, have only one plan, and that is to take the other half away from them. We see the example in Gaza. Gaza was given to them. The Jews moved out of Gaza, hoping now there's going to be peace because they have all the land. They are under complete leadership. And what happens? It's not the case, is it? So those Jews are sadly mistaken by trying to divide the country. Plus, the Bible, the Old Testament, is clear about it, that God hates a division in the land because God gave this land to Israel.
A at the end of the day, this isn't an Arab issue. This isn't a black and white issue. This is an issue for people. This is a human rights issue that needs to be solved as soon as possible.
The U.S. should no longer fund Israel. They are funding the murder and massacre of Palestinian families and humans. These are humans, they're families, they're people. We exist. We deserve a right to exist on our land. The occupation!
The message to the U.S. government is to stop funding Israel with $3.8 billion in military aid a year. The message to Israel is that you cannot have a two-state plan and be preaching peace while you have people behind walls and being bombed and murdered and land stolen from them. That is not the way to peace.
Okay, they're having a talk over there.
There are other signs that said Jews for free Palestine. A man is saying it is a human right issue. A sign says stop funding, start sanctioning Israel. A woman says America is funding murderers. Well, if Hamas wouldn't have started the war, there would not have been killing and death. Many of you are familiar with Amir Tsarfati. On Sunday, the 23rd of May, he had a very important current events update, and I'd like you to listen to that.
At 3 a.m., there was a huge explosion in Isfahan in Iran, huge explosion. And some residents in Iran actually reported that the skies turned red. That's how big it was. The shock waves destroyed even windows all around that area. But the amazing thing is that they reported it was a factory for some chemicals and all of that. Well, guess what? It was just released that it is actually the factory, the plant that is making those drones that exploded. It's gone. And why is it so important? Because the handprints of Iran is all over the Gaza conflict. They supplied the money, they supplied the equipment, they supplied the moral justification. Everything is made in Iran. Iran wants Israel to suffer for what Israel is doing to Iran. And the Iranians admitted that. And the Islamic Jihad and Hamas admitted that also. So the big news is that their pride of their security industry there has just been destroyed. 3 a.m. It was a little bit more than 12 hours ago. Now, another thing you want to know is that deception, of course, is what they always use. They use deception to lie to their own people, but they also do whatever they can to deceive the whole world when it comes to Gaza. They showed pictures of dead children that they actually took from Syria and Iraq, and they showed it online as if this is from Gaza. They, recycling things from other wars in other places just to magnify everything to show as if this is it. By the way, another thing, another lie and deception was Hamas claimed that the Israeli Prime Minister agreed to a ceasefire, and he agreed also by accepting their terms not to allow Jews to the Temple Mount. So they claimed victory and they told their people, look, we won. But guess what? 7 a.m. this morning, a group of Israelis entered the Temple Mount. In fact, not one, not two, not three, 4 groups. Over 120 Israelis visited the Temple Mount today.
I want you to go ahead and take a look at what happened.
A factory that makes Iranian drones has suffered a major explosion days after Israel had claimed that Iran was providing drones to Hamas in Gaza. The blast at the weekend injured at least 9 workers at the petrochemical factory in Isfahan. The Iran Aircraft Manufacturing Industrial Company, HISA, which produces a variety of aircraft and drones for Iranian and pro-Iranian forces, is located in the complex owned by Sepahan Nargistar Chemical Industries. Iran has not provided information on the cause of the incident, but Israel has shown no compunction in the past about taking what it regards as reprisals inside Iran. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, on Thursday showed the remains of what he described as an Iranian drone that was downed on Tuesday after crossing from Iraqi or Syrian airspace.
Monday the 24th of May, Hamas thanks Iran for help in attacking Israel. You see, many of the equipment and the rockets came straight from Iran. How did they get into the country? Through tunnels from Egypt. Not from Israel. Those tunnels were detected and blown up, but there are still tunnels into Egypt. And that's where hundreds and even thousands of rockets were funneled through. In Iran's press TV with English captions, Haniyeh says, "And I cannot but thank those who brought forth money and weaponry to the valiant resistance, the Islamic Republic of Iran, who did not hold back with money, weapons, and technical support. Thanks." Yeah, really, thank you for making it possible that many of the Palestinians died. Tuesday the 25th. I hate to even go there. On that day, Jerusalem LGBTQ plus pride making a comeback after coronavirus. A year ago, they canceled this awful parade. But now that the corona is down, they're back out on the street. God hates that. In today's reality in Israel, with political instability and evil spirits of conflict among us, it is now more important than for us to come together and raise a flag of change. That's what they're saying. Raise the flag, you know, the rainbow flag upside down, said the Jerusalem Open House. Romans 1:24, God's word says this, "Therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degenerating of their bodies with one another." Wednesday the 26th, Iranian militia leader Mosleh arrested by Iraqi government and released after pressure from Iranian militia. So what happens? This fellow there is a leader of the Iranian resistance group in Iraq. He keeps attacking the U.S. installations there, where the soldiers are, where the equipment is. And so many of those rockets actually got into the American camp, and so he got arrested by the Iraqis. The Iraqis are trying to help the Americans. And so there was so much pressure on the Iraqi government that they had to actually release him. Watch this little video.
يعني حشد شعبي، جيش عراقي، قوات حدود، شرطة اتحادية. هذا واحد منهم يقول ما قتل.
It's raining mice in Australia, literally, and I'm not making this up or reading it out from a Murakami. Millions of mice have infested Australia, and they're everywhere. Houses, garages, water tanks, under the beds. Mice are also crawling into beds and biting people. Those living in Australia and in Australian cities are patching up holes in their homes and sealing the doors. In the rural areas, farmers are losing their harvest. The government has declared a war on the tailed army and announced a package worth $50 million. Our next report brings you the battle plan.
Imagine this. You open a cupboard and out jump some mice. You go to your kitchen and there are mice everywhere. Sounds like a horror movie or a nightmare? Welcome to Australia. Here, it's a reality. There is mouse plague down under, and it looks something like this. Disgusted already? Watch this. It's raining mice, quite literally. They are inside houses, on the walls, on the roofs, inside containers. They are everywhere, dead and alive.
Luke 21:11 says this: there will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places. You might remember a couple months ago we talked about the locusts in Africa and how it's eating tons of food, and there will be a starvation that is just incredible. But now we hear of more pestilences. Yes, it's a sign of the end times. Sunday the 30th of May. Russia deploys heavy, long-range Tupolev bombers at Syrian base. So there's another base now in northwestern Syria, right on the ocean or close to the ocean, where the Russians now have a base for those huge bombers that can reach easily into all of Israel. And so that's not the first one. There's numerous ones already. Russian bases all over Syria. Isn't that interesting? Getting closer and closer to Israel. The day is coming, says the Bible. Ezekiel 38:6 and 9-11 says this: from the far north, that's Russia, and all its troops, many people are with you. You and all your troops and the many nations with you will go up, advancing like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade the land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people. That day might not be too far away. Monday the 31st of May, Iran. Hamas already rebuilding Iran-backed rocket arsenal. So just as quickly as they were shot up in the air, they're bringing in new ones and replacing the ones for the next war, for the next killing of their own people. Crazy, isn't it? When will it all end? Not until the end of the 7-year tribulation, when Jesus comes back to earth with all the believers. That's you and I. We are coming back with Jesus at the end of the 7 years, and Jesus will go to Jerusalem, and he will establish a temple on the Temple Mount, and the 1,000-year reign will begin, and you and I will enjoy peace for 1,000 years. Remember, the epicenter of the world is Israel. The epicenter of Israel is Jerusalem, and the epicenter of Jerusalem is the Temple Mount. That's where it's happening. We need to keep our eyes on Israel, on Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount. I want to close with a timeline of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. So we are here where that left arrow is down, and there is an unspecified time here until possibly the rapture, or maybe the Ezekiel war first, and then the rapture. You see, the Bible doesn't tell us which one will come first. Is it the rapture or is it the Ezekiel war? But as we see the Ezekiel war come closer and closer, and the nations involved are so full of hate and so ready to destroy Israel, that will be that war. Next month, Lord willing, I plan to talk a little bit more about it. Some other things that lead up to that horrible war. The one thing that we know for sure is that God's word is true. God is not a liar. He told us in advance what will happen. History in advance. Some 400 different things that He told us will happen. And they are happening. And you and I have the privilege of living in that very time. On this day, when we watch in the world the development. When we see Christianity fall away. When we see sin abound around the world. Jesus is coming. He might be coming very soon. And we need to be ready. Have you accepted the Lord as your Savior? I trust you have. If not, do it today. Ask Him to come into your heart. Ask forgiveness of your sins. And be assured that you will be one of the ones that will be taken up in the rapture. Lord bless you. Until next time, Pastor Reinhold.